Welcome to True Talk. This is your host, Samar Jarrah. My co-host, Ahmed, is traveling, and inshallah, God willing, he will be joining me next week. A beautiful day in Florida. I am in the studio, so we can take your phone calls and your emails. We're going to be having an interesting conversation with Professor Mohammed Al-Masri. Again, God willing, inshallah. He is a professor of media studies at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, but he is also a rapper and a musician. We're going to be talking about media coverage of Syria as well as Gaza, and maybe if there is a double standard there. But let me begin by playing this song by Professor Mohammed Al-Masri. This is True Talk on WMNF 88.5 FM.
Bullet point. Yeah. Hey, I don't play with words, I bully 'em. B, I take clean nouns and verbs and sully 'em. See, without all the beats, man, it's like murder in the streets, man. Condolences to beat makers that I meet, man. I'm a twin hard rocker, you a rock cat, New Britain. Wiki my lyrics so you could get them. But really though, lots of people wishing death to me. If somebody gets to me, that ain't nothing but some destiny. The Lord is always testing me. It ain't hard to find an enemy. It's hard to hide my disgust. I throw weight like a discus. I'm up to my ears in distrust. I'm just dealing with some demons, man. Yeah, I'm just deconstructing meanings, man. I'm in front of the class discussing injustice in a tussle with some maggots, and they flustered in a tussle with some mega busters going hard at officers, immigration and customs. I rock ice, no bling, dog. Believe that I rock ice. Purified. They gon' add this to my bureau file. This is fire, what you purify. They gon' add this to my bureau file. Ain't from Syracuse, never liked the orange man. Why would I like Donald Trump? The orange man, the president's a fascist. His family is classless like Marxism after the revolution of the masses. People wonder if it's alright to punch people on the alt-right, like the Nazi Richard Spencer when he got busted in the jaw. I ain't here to condone violence, but I don't condone silence. In the face of white supremacy, I'm wiping out your registry. We knocking down border walls, rocking Black Lives Matter shirts, pissing off the racists, while with a mortar attacking their collars. Right here I'm a rapper, not a scholar. Big homie, don't get a bent. Tell the president he can holler. I've been reading how it's in. I'm studying the people's history of the United States. Rights have never been granted, they've been taken. Word up. Next time you send those gung-ho FBI dudes to my spot, better tell them chumps to pack a lunch. Listen, this is fire, what's a purified? They gon' add this to my bureau file. This is fire, what's a purified? They gon' add this to my bureau file.
This is your brain on drugs. Karma that'll drain your plugs. You in it for the mission or the fame or lust. All this hate, let us pray for love. Plus, couldn't bury all our money when you face above. Did you live your whole life on that chase for fun? I felt the rush too when I hit the Dolma and such. It's still Cheney, Rumsfeld, Obama, and Bush. Smoke, Jarrah, Kush. I hope we get offended. And it was written so I hummed and penned it. I meant it if I said it, never regret it. But plead the Fifth Amendment. Between you and I never knew how to edit. I've been the same since a juvenile youth. Off the wall like a urinal. Truth is the new denial. We the answers to the questions that you defy. Tell the feds they can add this to my bureau file.
What's purified?
Wow.
They gon' add this to my bureau file.
Blah.
This is fire, what you purify. They gon' add this to my bureau file. Yeah, what up? Big bullet, big cats, Nazi, SP.
Quite interesting. I'm sure you have listened to what he was saying. And obviously it is about Trump. I'm waiting I'm waiting for Professor Mohammed Al-Masri to join us. But if you've been keeping with the news, things are developing every day in Gaza, as well as Syria, and as well as the Arab world. Never a dull moment when it comes to this part of the world. Ahmed and I sometimes say, "Oh, wow, maybe we're running out of topics to talk about." But unfortunately, there is always something that we need to be discussing when it comes to the Arabic world. I'm still waiting for Dr. Muhammad to join me. Let's listen to one more song by him, Like a Traveler. This is True Talk on WMNF 88.5 FM.
Bullet point. Brother Ali. I was treated like an alien growing up in the States. For real. You know, they call me slurs in them elementary grades. For real. I grew up, moved to Egypt, sad state. The government ain't like me, had to escape. I'd have been thrown in a dungeon till I chosen to stay. So what I do? I snuck back to the States. Place colder than ice is. They made ISIS, created ICE. Immigration is trifling. They wouldn't even let my wife in. It's funny, ever since they started profiling me, all FBI, CBP, and TSA dudes look alike to me. So I travel like a nomad. I stay on the move till I'm an old man, and then die without a homeland. Oh well, I stayed in my element, became a citizen of the world. My teacher said the best heart medicine is to jettison the world. Yeah, so my sense of belonging, I stay a slave to God. I haven't lost, I found myself. All praise to Allah. All praise to Allah.
And welcome back to True Talk. I am very pleased to say that Professor Muhammad Al-Masri has joined us. He is actually in very cold Minnesota, probably. Professor Muhammad is Professor of Media Studies at Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, and he joins us live. Good morning, Professor Muhammad.
Good morning, Samar. It's good to be with you.
Yes, Professor, I was just mentioning to our listeners that, you're actually a very well-sought expert on media, but this bulletproof or bullet point music, I just played the recent one about Trump, and now I was playing Like a Traveler. When did you start knowing that you are also a rapper and a musician?
Well, I just do it as a side hobby. The song about Trump is actually not recent. Oh. I haven't done anything in the last 2.5 years. Okay. It's just when I have time. But I've been rapping since I was in high school. So I've had various careers where I've done it for a while and then I give it up, and then I come back to it when I miss it. But it's something that I have fun with. It's a side hobby, but it's an expensive one, so I can't just keep producing songs all the time, and then it's also a time commitment. So, but I have fun with it, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you playing the songs.
Because like you said, I know you as a professor, a very serious one when we are interviewing you, but then to see this music, it's beautiful. But one more question. I know the lyrics are yours, the singing is you, the music is yours, like the composing?
No. I work with producers, yeah. So all I do is rap. I write my own lyrics and I rap, but I work with very talented producers who usually send me very well-produced, professional sounding tracks. That's always the first step for me, because I need to be kind of inspired by the music, by the musical production. So I always start there, and then I write from there, based on what the music is kind of telling me.
Interesting. And of course, they are all about issues. Like you were rapping about Trump, and I think about the FBI and being a Muslim in America. But I want to shift gears because I know you are on a tight schedule. And please, Dr. Muhammad, whenever you feel like you have to go, just let me know. You're a media expert, and we have been having this genocidal war on Gaza for more than a year now, and a lot of criticism when it comes to American media. And then things develop in Syria in a couple of days, and all of a sudden we find that CNN is interviewing somebody who is on a terrorism list of the State Department. There is a bounty of $10 million, whoever captures him. And I find this, and I have to tell our listeners, I have never supported this brutal genocidal regime in Syria, whether Hafiz al-Assad or his son Bashar. So any discussion we are doing today has nothing to do with the regime of Bashar. I am curious and always interested in media coverage and the double standard. So is it normal, Professor Al-Masri, to have a station like CNN to be interviewing somebody on a terrorism list? For instance, I did not know that they interviewed Sinwar or anybody who works with Hamas. Do you find that this observation is correct?
Well, I do think you're making an interesting observation, but there are some differences, right? When we talk about Sinwar versus Abu Muhammad al-Julani, there are key differences. One key difference is that CNN and other Western journalists have pretty much unfettered access to Syria. They can get in and get around, and I mean, at least certainly now, and interview whomever they want. They can cover the news, as you've been seeing. But Israel has systematically prevented journalists from accessing Gaza. They basically shut down journalism. It's been, as we've discussed before on your program, it's not just a war on Hamas or even just a war on Palestinians, but it's also been a war on journalists and journalism. Israel went to some lengths to make sure that no journalists could get into Gaza. In fact, last November of 2023, when they were negotiating that temporary pause in the fighting, that was one of the kind of the sticking points early on. Israel and the United States both wanted to make sure that no journalists would be allowed in during that 6-day pause. So that's one really important difference. Another difference is that the United States government, certainly they will view HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, with caution and suspicion, but they are, generally speaking, not opposed to Bashar al-Assad being deposed. All right, I don't, it's a long and complicated story. I don't know how far down the road you want to go on this. I don't necessarily think they wanted him to fall. I think they would have been more comfortable with him being severely weakened and much kind of the status quo, but not necessarily falling, because I think there are going to be many more new concerns now from the perspective of the American administration with a new government that will be influenced at a minimum by Islamists, right? So, and that's to say nothing of the terrorist designation. And then you mentioned the terrorist designation. I think it's well known that the wheels are already in motion. I think that the terrorist designation will be lifted. I don't know exactly when, but I suspect that that will happen in relatively short order, and that the United States is going to also cancel that bounty.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just that was my final thought on that. So I'm just trying to draw attention to some of the differences, but yeah, it is it's strange in a sense, but also remember this is a news organization, certainly part of the U.S. propaganda network, but not affiliated in any official sense with the United States government. They are free to interview people, and this is not the first time they've interviewed sort of people that are considered unsavory by the standards of the U.S. government, and sometimes they do that actually to in a critical way, where they interview these people in order to undermine them. So it's interesting, certainly, but I just think that the dynamics are so different. Gaza and Syria.
You raised two important points, but I want to go to one that I find it quite interesting. Especially when you talk about the role of the U.S., because, for instance, in the Arab world, people are like two camps. One says that this whole thing was kind of a CIA operation with the help of Turkey and the Kurds and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And then you have people who say, no, that was a genuine overthrow of the regime of Bashar al-Assad, and it collapsed because it was based on torture and was not democratic or popular. So you are not with the camp that says this was, in a way, an U.S. operation?
No, I don't think it was a U.S. Operation per se. I just don't think that we have evidence for that. Mm-hmm. And I also, doubt very much that the United States would want to turn Syria over to Islamists, whether the U.S. considers them terrorists or not. I don't think the U.S. was comfortable with the Muslim Brotherhood governing Egypt, for instance. I think they were quite happy to see the Muslim Brotherhood fall, even though they are.
Why is that, Professor? Sorry to interrupt, but why is that? What is wrong with having a democratically elected Islamist government, let's say, in their point of view?
Yeah. Well, there are profound fears in Washington, grossly exaggerated fears about Islamists and really about Islam itself, Samar. I mean, we could go all the way back to Edward Said. I mean, this is something that goes back centuries in the West. This fixation with Islam and especially the political aspects of Islam. But there's a fear there, and that this is one kind of overarching explanation, not just for how the U.S. Deals with Egypt or Syria, but with how they deal with the Muslim world in general. The U.S. has long preferred violent, secular dictators, as long as they stay far away from anything that promotes Islam or Islamism. The fear, I think it's irrational, but the fear that they have is that the Muslim countries are all going to unite under some kind of a caliphate and then start challenging the U.S. order and perhaps even being antagonistic toward it and wanting to fight it violently. That's the thought process. I don't think that that's rational or fair, but that's how many people in Washington view it. As you know, my personal view is that the people on the ground should have say in their fate, and I'm a Democrat, a small d Democrat, and I think that people in the Muslim majority world have the same or should have the same rights to decide on their leaders that people in the Western world have. Unfortunately, the West, and especially the United States, has a very long history of undermining democracy in many parts of the world, but in particular in the Muslim world.
But Professor, isn't this undermining of democracy and this propping up of dictators who are, like Bashar? Many of them are brutal, maybe not in that obvious brutality, maybe a little bit lesser. But these systems created very extremist fringes and organizations like Al-Qaeda, like other Islamist ideology that is really wants to get rid of everybody is standing in their way. There is no one in Washington that can see that it's failing, that it has failed since they got involved with the 1952 overthrow of the democratically elected prime minister of Iran? I mean, it's hopeless. It's not going to change.
I don't have much hope. I mean, not so long as the American foreign policy is run by Democrats and Republicans. There's just very little difference between them on foreign policy issues. I've been to Congress, and I've been to the State Department, and I've spoken to people, and I tried to convince people there in Washington in 2013 and 2014, not that Egypt's new leader, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, knew at that time that not that he was violating human rights and, undermining Egyptians, because I didn't, I was realistic. I don't think they cared about that stuff. I tried to convince them that this was actually not, this new military regime was not in the best interests of the United States. But what I kept getting met with over and over was the idea that, Sisi and other military dictators like him are the best people to bring about stability in the region. And that's what the United States values above all else. They value stability in the region. They want to make sure that they have the hegemonic power, of course, and that their ally, their adopted child, Israel, is the regional hegemon. But they want stability.
Is it also, like you mentioned, Israel, but is it also because these dictators are easily to manipulate or get rid of, and not having a parliament where people, how the Arab world, the people, the masses, they are supportive of not necessarily the Palestinian people as much as the Palestinian cause and the right of the Palestinians to have a homeland. Is that what we're seeing in Washington, also influenced by the power of the Israeli lobby? Because I remember one time when I went, and it was issues related really to Palestine, and I think I went to the office of McCain before he passed away, and his assistant told me, look, anything you want has to do with the Israeli lobby. They are the ones who tell us what to do. He told me that bluntly.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I don't think the average American understands the extent to which the Israel lobby controls aspects of American policy. It's an extremely powerful lobby, at least as powerful as the NRA, if not more powerful. And I would encourage people who think I'm exaggerating as they're listening to me to read the book that was written by Professors John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, two of the best known international affairs scholars in the world. They wrote a book in 2007 called The Israel Lobby. And this is the argument that they make, is that the Israel lobby basically has U.S. politics in a stranglehold. And it's very difficult for the political parties and certainly difficult also for individual American politicians to extricate themselves from the grasp of that Israeli influence. So it's a real problem. There's no question about it. And I don't know how to get through it or move forward other than, to try and prop up some kind of a third party. It just feels as though the Democrats and the Republicans they're just in too deep and too far gone at this point. Maybe things can change over the long term, especially if there are these serious demographic changes in the United States. You've seen somewhat over the past year, Israel lose quite a bit of standing in the United States among youth, not so much among older people, but among 18 to 24 and then 24 to 35-year-olds. That group or those groups do not have very favorable opinions of Israel. So I suppose there's hope over the long term that something could change on that front.
If you're just joining us, this is True Talk on WMNF 88.5 FM. I'm talking with Dr. Mohammed Al-Masri, who is Professor of Media Studies at Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, and he is in St. Paul, Minnesota at the moment. You are a follower, of course, of media and all that happens in the media. More than 120 journalists have died in Gaza, and you had mentioned something very important at the beginning, that Israel prevents foreign journalists from going to Gaza to cover what is going on. I have two questions. One, so if, let's say, CNN and or BBC or NPR went to Gaza and covered, maybe they were allowed for a couple of days, you think it would have made so much difference that Israel doesn't care about being labeled undemocratic and no freedom of speech, and risk all that in order not to allow just one foreign journalist from entering Gaza?
Well, they did allow a small number of journalists, including CNN. Clarissa Ward was there, Nick Robertson was there. The problem, though, is that these people are usually embedded with the Israeli forces in Gaza. So they end up being sort of propaganda tools for the Israeli government. And there are all kinds of strict requirements that the journalists have to adhere to when they're embedded with a military unit. I think
I meant for them to be like going freely the way they are in Syria now, for instance, or they were in Lebanon.
I think that Israel, I understand your question. I think Israel, I think they want their cake and they want to eat it too. So I think to the extent possible, they really want to look good, or look as good as possible, or as maybe least bad, if that's the proper way of phrasing it. And for them, it's probably, the calculus is probably, it's better for us to be seen as restricting, freedom of the press. That's better than being seen as a genocidal actor. Because I think that if there were a flood of journalists inside of Gaza, if there were hundreds and even thousands of Western journalists inside of Gaza, then the coverage would have been overwhelmingly negative. It would have actually gotten to the point where I think it would have demonized Israel, especially because so many Western journalists would have been killed, undoubtedly, just based on Israeli military policy. They have these, 100-to-1 ratios, where if they find out, this is their military, doctrine, if they find out that there's a Hamas commander in an area, they bomb the area, even if it's going to kill more than 100 people in collateral damage. This is all published in Israeli media. It's well known. So, of course, journalists are killed. Aid workers are killed, women and children are killed. 70% of the people killed in Gaza are women and children, according to the United Nations. They just completed a study on that based on a massive sample of 6 months. And then you have world records now for journalists. You said 120. It's actually, some of the other estimates suggest that we're around 200 killed journalists. CPJ, the Committee to Protect Journalists, has a much more conservative metric, and so they're at around 120. But I actually think it's up closer to 200 or even more than 200. So that's a world record. It's also a world record for aid workers. The United Nations, in all of the conflicts that it's been on the ground.
Professor? Okay, I don't know how I lost him. Professor Mohammed, I can't hear you anymore. Okay. Okay, let me play this segment. It's the U.S. State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller, avoiding directly condemning Israel's killing of Palestinian journalists and downplaying the circumstances. And then there's circumstances of the killings of one particular journalist, but many of them, like what Mohammed al-Masri was saying. And the State Department spokesperson is shifting the focus to a ceasefire discussion. You're going to be listening to the voice of journalist Nadia al-Belbisi as well as Saeed Ariqat, and this is from the press of the daily press briefing of the State Department. Here is this segment.
Just on Gaza, another journalist, a colleague of us, has been killed yesterday. That brings the number of journalists being killed in Gaza to 196. How many times we can ask the same questions that journalists in Gaza needed to be protected?
Hello?
And how many incidents we're still waiting for the Israelis to be investigated?
Good to have you back, Professor. I am playing a segment of the press briefing with U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller, where he avoids to condemn the killing of journalists in Gaza. I'm not sure if you can listen to it, but bear with me for like 1 minute. Here is the rest of the segment.
You to come back to us and said this person's held accountable for the killing of Muhammad
So
Baruch.
journalists in Gaza absolutely need to be protected. When it comes to Israeli government investigations, you should ask the government of Israel that question. We obviously engaged with them about that and pressed for answers, but you were certainly welcome to do so as well. Those are Israeli government investigations, but we have made clear that when it comes to journalists, they need to be protected. I will tell you, ultimately, the answer to this is to get a ceasefire, which is why we continue to push for a ceasefire. The journalists that are operating in Gaza are doing so with incredible heroism. All of us in this room, including in many cases the United States government, know what we know about actions on the ground because there are journalists there that are reporting on it. The U.S. doesn't have any personnel on the ground to verify reports, so we rely on journalists to bring that information forward, and we rely on the work that they do. But as long as it is an active conflict zone, journalists are going to be at risk the same way other civilians are going to be at risk, which is why we believe the ultimate answer to this question is to reach a ceasefire, and why we continue to use all of the diplomatic muscle that we can bring to bear to try to get one over the line.
Sure. I mean, the reason I ask you is because the United States value press freedom and the work of the journalists on the ground, but we don't hear you condemning the killing of Palestinian journalists like you condemn the killing of other journalists in conflict zones.
We absolutely condemn the death of any journalist. We don't want to see any journalist hurt anywhere. Now, when it comes to the specifics of how any one journalist dies, while we object to the killing of any journalist, oftentimes we don't know the circumstance under which they were killed, whether it is an accidental strike, whether they were somewhere where they were covering an incident and there was a militant nearby. It's difficult to speak to the motives behind a strike when we don't know them, but absolutely we condemn the death of any journalist anywhere in the world.
Just to follow up on the journalists. 190 journalists. That's all by accidental, you think?
I can't speak to any of those incidents without having full information. But ultimately, Saeed, every one of those deaths is a tragedy, which is why we need to stop more deaths from happening, which is why we need to get a ceasefire.
If you're joining us now, this is True Talk on WMNF 88.5 FM. I'm talking to Professor Mohammed al-Masri, who is a professor of media studies. And you were just listening to an excerpt of the U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller avoiding directly condemning Israel's killing of Palestinian journalists, actually downplaying the circumstances and shifting the focus to ceasefire discussion. Here, Professor al-Masri, he's actually saying we don't know the circumstances, and this brings me back to what you said, 1 to 100. The journalist Saeed Ariqat just told him 190 journalists all died by accident. I mean, how could the U.S. be so? I mean, I can understand why, but in case there are listeners who don't know, how could this not be condemned? I mean, if this was happening at the hands of Bashar al-Assad, I am sure the State Department would be having a different conversation here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or I mean, you can just juxtapose the response to what Vladimir Putin did in Ukraine just a couple of years ago. Whether it was a journalist or a hospital being struck, the reactions from the United States were very swift and very harsh, but not with Israel. The U.S. will always turn a blind eye to Israeli atrocities. That's just consistent U.S. policy. So it's very difficult to listen to Matthew Miller because he's just lying, to be perfectly blunt. He knows, maybe the lay people don't know, but he knows about the 100-to-1 policy. He also knows about the Dahiya doctrine, which is another Israeli military policy which calls explicitly on the Israeli army to inflict maximum damage to civilians and civilian areas as a means of punishing the civilians, driving them away, and then hoping that they will turn against their own government. This is official Israeli policy. He also is aware of Israel's various kill zone policies. It's interesting because a year ago, Samar, you'll recall that in Gaza, Israel killed 3 of its own captives. These were 3 Israelis who had been taken captive by Hamas in October of 2023. They had somehow gotten free. They were shirtless. They were waving white flags or white T-shirts, as it were, and yelling in Hebrew, and yet they were killed because Israel operates kill zone policies. It just declares certain areas arbitrarily to be off limits, combat zones, and anybody who moves, whether it's an Israeli, whether it's a Palestinian, it could be a 2-year-old toddler, anyone who's inside the kill zone will be killed. Matthew Miller knows about all of these Israeli policies, but he doesn't want to say, he can't say that Israel is, guilty of these heinous atrocity crimes. He just can't say that, in part because of the consequences for U.S. Policy. The U.S. wants to continue to support Israel, and it doesn't want to be seen as complicit in any way in these crimes.
I want to go to the the event when we were starting to see that the system of Bashar al-Assad was collapsing, and the country, and he fled or nowhere to be seen. Israel launched more than 450 attacks on Syria. How did our U.S. media deal with that event? Because I'm looking here, for instance, at a New York Times headline, and it says, and I'm quoting here, "In visit to territory seized in Syria, Netanyahu says troops will stay." Now, very smart language to not say occupied or invaded or stolen by Israel. I mean, troops will stay. Which troops? The UN troops? I mean, how did our media cover this very, very major event that took place immediately in Syria?
Well, I can only speak kind of anecdotally because I haven't done a study on this. But from what I've seen, it's not surprising that they've been kind of downplaying, as you're describing, these Israeli atrocities. Certainly not, talking up the fact that this is an illegal occupation, the occupation of the Golan Heights. And doing everything to avoid condemning Israel. One of the reasons that happens somewhat, and I think this is really important to underscore, one of the reasons this happens is because American news outlets tend to rely overwhelmingly on Israeli sources. Mm-hmm. In fact, there was just a study that came out, I think it was yesterday, done by The Nation, where they looked at these Sunday morning, news talk shows, right? The State of the Union show on CNN and the CBS morning talk show. They looked at 4 major Sunday morning news shows, and they found that over the course of a year, these are hundreds of episodes that they examined, there was only one Palestinian guest brought on to speak about the events in Gaza, and there were numerous Israeli guests, and then even more pro-Israeli guests from inside the United States administration. I've also done a recent study where I counted up the sources, and we're talking, depending on the platform, between 5 and 10 times as many Israeli sources as Palestinian sources. So there's this overwhelming disparity. And what happens, anybody who's studied journalism or who's been trained in journalism, what ends up happening is that the source dominates the frame. So the Israelis are basically getting to dictate how news reports, news stories are being framed in the New York Times and in CNN and many other American mainstream news outlets.
I know you have to go, Professor, and I'm going to play this segment after you leave us because it's a little bit long. But if, like Al Jazeera or any other Arab broadcast service or news organization went into Syria or went into Israel and did what Clarissa, I forgot her name, Clarissa Ward, I don't know if she was fabricating this or she was really very not smart journalist, although she went to, like you said, many dangerous zones. And how could she not know that this person she found in one of the infamous prisons, torture prisons of Bashar al-Assad, that he was lying? I'm going to play it later on because I know you have to go, but people have a tendency to think this is part of a propaganda, and she knew it, and she thought she can run away with it. And some people say, no, he deceived her and CNN. But wouldn't CNN do kind of investigation of this journalist or put her on leave until they figure out what is going on? I mean, how could... Maybe if you can give a background on this report I'm talking about, and then as a media professor, tell us where things went wrong here.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that in a few minutes.
Okay.
I have an article coming out either today or tomorrow, if people want to check it out, in the Middle East Eye about Clarissa Ward and how CNN dealt with this. But basically, the long and the short of it, for people that don't know, is that she presented a report on Wednesday, December 11th, basically suggesting or implying that she helped in a kind of rescue operation, that she rescued one of these, a civilian prisoner who had been locked up by Bashar al-Assad for a long time. This person was hungry and thirsty and so on and so forth. Well, people very quickly chimed in, fact checkers and viewers who knew who this man was. He wasn't a civilian. He was actually a Bashar al-Assad intelligence officer who had been jailed only recently for corruption-related charges, and so they had that part of the story wrong, and that was kind of the major problem. But what I write in my articles, I can't say for sure if it was staged. People can watch the report and decide for themselves and read some of the fact checkers. Look, it certainly looks like it was staged. There are some very, very strange aspects of just irregularities when you look at it critically. But I can't say for sure, so I'm not gonna accuse her of being of making this up or staging it. What I will say is that there are a few problems here that we can point to very quickly. The first is the what media scholars call the Hollywoodization of news. Mm-hmm. So news organizations are becoming so sensational, and they prioritize entertainment, or what analysts sometimes call infotainment, right? They try to inform, but the main priority is to try to get people's attention and to entertain them. And CNN is actually one of the outlets that's most guilty of this. And there's been some work done on this by Daya Thusu and other media scholars. The second problem that I had with this is that CNN was presenting itself as a kind of savior. And that was just really rich. That was really difficult to take in, because CNN and other American news outlets have a long history of doing this, of presenting themselves or presenting their governments, Western governments, the American government, sometimes white people, as saviors, when the realities on the ground suggest something very, very different. And in this case, CNN and Clarissa Ward cannot sell themselves as saviors of Syrians or of Arabs or Muslims or anyone else, for that matter. There's some evidence to suggest, and there's actually there are some legal experts kind of working on this right now as we speak. But there's some evidence to suggest that CNN might be complicit in the genocide in Gaza. And so the idea that they could then turn around and present themselves as saviors, and then the fact that they could get the story so wrong, that just underscores so much of what is wrong with CNN. And the last thing that I'll say is that it has been breathtaking to watch their reaction, and also the reaction of Clarissa Ward. They have not taken accountability or owned up to it in any way. In fact, if you look at CNN, what they've done is they've subtly kind of edited the story to sort of make it look like these are just normal, routine updates to the story, just developments that they've learned about. They're not calling it a false report. They're not apologizing. They're not retracting. People are on X and other social media sites are livid. They're asking, why hasn't Clarissa Ward been fired, or at least suspended, or reprimanded in some way? I mean, she published a false a false story here, but they're not. CNN is not really acknowledging any wrongdoing. And then Clarissa Ward, her most recent tweet, or her most recent post to X, was from a few days ago. This is as of a couple of hours ago. I haven't seen her page in the last couple of hours, but it just says, "We can confirm the real identity of the man from our story last Wednesday as Salama Muhammad Salama." So, she's just presenting it here as though it's an update, as that she's learned something, when the reality is very different. What happened was that fact checkers and just normal viewers saw that her reporting was completely false, and they called her out on it, and it was all very public, and she's been forced to correct the story. So the end result here, as I said in my article, or the article that will come out hopefully today or tomorrow, is that there's this massive lack of public trust in the media. A recent Gallup poll showed that only 31% of Americans express either a great deal or a fair amount of confidence in news media. This is an all-time low. So, and stories like this, incidents like this, actually contribute to the problem. So I think it's a real crisis of journalistic professionalism in many ways.
I know you have to leave. I checked her X account. The last tweet was the one that you alluded to 2 days ago. But before we leave, Professor, you just mentioned something very, very quickly. You said CNN might be held accountable to genocide in Gaza. If you can just elaborate for a minute.
Yeah. Well, what I can do is refer people to an article written by a legal expert and former UN, high-ranking UN officer Craig McIver. And I'm trying to find out where he published this. I believe it was published in. I'm not finding it right now.
No worries.
But his name is spelled. People can Google it. Yeah. His name is spelled Mokhiber. I believe it may have been published in Mondoise, but he lays out a very interesting legal argument. And yes, I can confirm that it was published in Mondoise in August, and it's called "Western Media Can Be Held Legally Accountable for Its Role in the Gaza Genocide." Wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Professor. I know you have to go. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on True Talk. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. My pleasure. This was a professor of media studies at Doha Institute. And he was talking to us from St. Paul, Minnesota. Always a pleasure to talk to him. Let me play this segment from the CNN, and it says, the title, CNN camera captures dramatic moment. A prisoner unaware of Assad's ouster is freed from Syria jail. Now, you don't need to be an expert, but for somebody who has been in jail for 3 months, and then you immediately see his face, his beard is very well shaven, very well kept. His nails, because he holds Clarissa's arm the whole time he's holding her and hugging her, and his nails are very clean. So for somebody who walks from a dark cell to outside, you'd think that he might have an issue with his eyesight, with his eyes. He might not be able to be in the sun. But the guy is like as if you and I just went after 3 minutes inside the house to outside. So listen to this. And if you have any comments, please send them to dj@wmnf.org. Here is the... it's like 5 minutes, but I'll play as much as I can.
Deep in the belly of the regime's Air Force intelligence headquarters,
these are English letters.
We are hoping to find traces of Austin Tice, an American journalist held captive in Syria since 2012. It's one of many secret prisons across the city. This specific branch was tasked with surveillance, arrest, and killing of all regime critics.
These are all cleaned out.
We don't find any hints of Tice, but come across something extraordinary.
I can't tell though, it might just be a blanket, but it's the only cell that's locked. Is he gonna shoot it?
The guard makes us turn the camera off while he shoots the lock off the cell door.
Now, it's funny because if you watch it on TV, you will see the door cell, and there is no indication that it was shot at. It looks perfectly okay, but let's go on.
Go in to get a closer look. It's still not clear if there is something under the blanket.
Oh, it moved. Is there someone there? I thought I saw it move. Is someone there? Or is it just a blanket? I don't know.
I think it's someone. Hello?
Okay, I just moved.
Yeah. Oh.
I'm a civilian, he says. I'm a civilian.
It's okay. It's okay.
He tells the fighter he's from the city of Homs.
Now, if you watch it, of course, Clarissa is acting like she's out of breath and she's going to die any minute from the shock.
He's been in the cell for 3 months.
Okay, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
He clutches my arm tightly with both hands.
Okay. Does anyone have any water? Water. My. Okay, it's water. It's water. Okay. Okay. You're okay. You're okay.
We start to walk him outside. Thank God you are safe. Don't be afraid, the fighter says. You are.
I wish you would go to a TV and or to YouTube and press camera captures dramatic moment, a prisoner unaware of Assad's ouster, and you will be amazed at this propaganda machine. It is really mind-boggling. Thank you so much for tuning in to True Talk. This is WMNF Tampa, and the scoop is next.